Hello, welcome Robin Thatcher to the Larpar Show, where we talk about what is money, what is coming, and how to protect your family. Robin is an experienced accountant with over 10 years experience advising on UK taxes to small to medium-sized businesses. They specialize in anything from business setup, record keeping, bookkeeping, tax returns, and advice on running your business in the most tax efficient method. He also brings to the table his knowledge about Bitcoin. So, Robin, when did you find out about Bitcoin and how did you come across it?
So my journey into Bitcoin really started I'd say about 3.5 years ago. So by that right, I should be a millionaire, right? But I started off in crypto as a whole, in the world of DeFi and for altcoins, for want of a better word. I made a bit, I lost a bit, went through a hack. I learned a lot of lessons, but from that, I also developed a basic understanding of it, of the blockchain, of the ledger, and of tax associated with it. So I sort of steered my business towards that as well, helping crypto investors as a whole work out their taxes because it's a very complex situation. From there, I started attending digital asset events. One of the events I led to in my journey, I was sort of at a bit of a crossroads. Actually, it was about when the bear market hit, and my investment thesis was flawed. I was doing too much, and I wasn't making any money, and I was moving too many bits around. And I went to the Bitcoin conference in Miami, and my outlook just changed. I read Safe Dean's the Bitcoin Standard. I don't know why I look at it on my shelf every time I say it. It became a bit of a Bible to me, but it also was such a knowledge base for someone in finance to learn those sort of things. I felt like not a fraud, but I felt like I've been lied to for a long time. So that took me down the rabbit hole. So I spent a lot of time learning, expanding my knowledge, not just in the tax side of things, but in the overall investment side. And sort of went in that side of things. Obviously, MicroStrategy, Bitcoin, that's my sole investment thesis now, and that's where it's led me to where I am now.
All right. Okay. And how has that journey progressed then since you started? Because, on this journey, the Bitcoin journey, we're always learning, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I'm still always learning now. I think the most important thing to me, and this is me being completely honest, is I read a long time ago. I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, and in that book, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. They said that Teddy Roosevelt, when he walks into a room, he had a method where he could always learn off someone. So every time I walk into a room, I'll always try and learn off someone. And the reason that's so important is because in my job of doing taxes, I get to network with so many brilliant people, Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners. But what that means is I can learn off those people and get their perception on what they've learned as well. And I might watch the same video, read the same book, do the same thing, but they pick up different things. So I think the most important thing to me is, whilst I haven't networked as much as I would like, I have learned so much from other people, and I think that's fascinating. My view on something might be someone else's. They might agree or they might respectfully disagree and give me a different viewpoint, and I find that fascinating as well. So for me, it's all just about learning off other people as well as the content that is out there.
Yeah. And I think it's very important as well, I think, to keep open-minded as well, isn't it? Especially in this
100%.
journey.
Whatever the subject matter is, you have got to keep an open mind. I think there's so much that as Bitcoiners we can come across as conspiracy theorists, or as not mad, but as laughed at by the general population. But that doesn't mean that I'm not open to people's opinions who are against it. It means that I can give an opposite opinion to what they have and have a healthy debate. I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah. True. Like, there is a lot of people out there that just look one way and they won't look the other way, or even two or three ways to try and get their own information, get their own data and dig themselves. They just maybe look at the television and they just get fed what other people are trying to feed them.
What I will say, and I actually agree with that, I actually think the education system as a whole, regardless of crypto, towards investment as a whole, we're not taught enough about investment as children. about tax as a whole, about running a business as a whole. I think that's so neglected. We're almost taught and educated in a way that we need to live that lifestyle that is, we earn money, we get paid on the same day every month, we have money left over, and we do with that what we please. I also, I also think that there's so much more that we can learn as people, that school doesn't teach us, that other people can with more experience, more, for example, yourself, Lawrence, you might have met 20,000 more people than I have that have a different opinion, and you'll have taken some of that away, and that could form something in my head that actually I really resonate with. And until you hear those words in a certain way or a certain style or in a certain opinion, you might not realize it. And I what you say with one dimension is very true. I mean, one of the examples I'll give was actually yesterday in the news. I read BBC News, and my wife was reading it to me, and she said there's a woman who was caught in London with £2 billion of Bitcoin on her ledger. The actual story, if you read it, was that there's a gang in Europe who've laundered a lot of money and they put it into Bitcoin, and she was trying to spend it. That's the story. But the news had spun that to be about Bitcoin. It was nothing to do with Bitcoin. They had stored their money in Bitcoin. That was it. There's nothing illegal about that. It would be the same as if they put £2 million into a bank and the news was reporting it that it was NatWest's fault. It just wasn't that way. But I do think the media spins a narrative, especially with something new and disruptive, that they don't want. So, and we're inclined to listen as a populace.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what has your change in mindset about what is money since you started looking at Bitcoin and since you started studying Bitcoin? Because it does change your whole outlook and your mindset about what is money.
So I've just had a conversation where someone else has taught me something, and they actually said, what does the word pound sterling mean? Well, the original term was, it was a pound worth of a pound of sterling silver. But we know that's not true anymore. When I read the Bitcoin Standard, it taught me about the history of money and where it sort of came from. And ultimately, money was there as a receipt against gold. So, £10 note would have been a receipt against an element of gold that was kept in a bank's reserve. Well, we know that's not true anymore. Banks don't keep gold like that anymore. So what is our money? I don't have the answer to that. I really don't know, because ultimately it's a piece of paper that we're told how much it's worth. I don't think it's worth anything necessarily. So whilst that sounds like a real conspiracy, I still spend money. Obviously, we have to. That's part of life. But what is the backing to that money? What is the value, the store of value against that money? And I don't see anything that is a store of value against it. It's not gold. It's not anything else. And actually, if the government changed it tomorrow, they could decipher what it's worth. The other thing that I read it was about the reserve currency of the world, if you like, which is US dollar. Why is it the US dollar? What do we pin our currency to the US dollar for, and why do we have to? And who deciphers the value of the US dollar? It's certainly not against gold reserves or any store of value. So it's changed my entire outlook on what it is that I have in my bank account, what value it is we have anywhere. I'm not saying it's going to collapse tomorrow, because I don't think it will, but I do think that at some point that has to be addressed.
Yeah, yeah. And it is changing at the moment, because we can see different things that are happening. Even we touched on there the US dollar and even sterling. There's other countries now that, with the BRICS countries, they're starting to go their own way. And only in January, another 5 countries joined the BRICS, 5 very powerful and big countries. So from the data that I have, there's probably about 70 to 80% of now the world's population in the BRICS, with all those countries that are after joining it. I think there's maybe 11 countries now that are in the BRICS, but they're very, very big countries. They've got huge economies. They're spending a lot, and now they're trading among themselves in their own currencies. It's the first time it's happened since since World War II, really, isn't it? When the Bretton Woods Agreement was done and the dollar became the world reserve currency in 2023, it started. And I can see it just accelerating and accelerating faster than most people think.
World War II ended in 1945, right? So we're saying that we've had no financial reform or change in 80 years. I mean, that's baffling in itself. And ultimately, why does there have to be a currency of the world that is the reserve currency? Because there shouldn't be. Surely we should go back to a standard where, I'm not saying go back to the gold standard, but the gold standard made sense, whereas what we have now makes no sense. So how do we address that problem? And I think the answer is something along the lines of Bitcoin. It has to be. It's got the elements that we need for it to be a successful currency. It's got scarcity. It's limited in its resource. Yes, okay, you can mine it, but you can mine it to a point. No one's making more. It's never been hacked. It's all down to, it's got the right elements. It probably, there's probably some tweaking within the world we need to do, but it's heading to that point.
Yeah. It is going towards Bitcoin, but for me personally, I think Bitcoin is more than a currency. It is a medium of exchange, but for me, I see it as a store of value. That's how it's helping me in my life and protecting me, but it's a lot more than that. I can't see the likes of the central bankers and the Bank of International Settlements letting go of control to the currency and the fiat system. That's why I can see these CBDCs coming in. And they're using that as their new type of currency, their digital currency.
I agree, and I absolutely don't see central banks or governments relinquishing control in any way, and they certainly wouldn't relinquish control unless they could somehow control Bitcoin, which is the whole point of it. They can't. So I absolutely agree. I'm strongly against CBDCs because I think it's exactly the same thing. It just causes a different sort of issue, and in fact, you end up excluding the population because you're saying, right, you've got to use this CBDC, but if you're 75, 80 years old, how are you meant to know how to use a CBDC when that's not the way you were brought up? You're just excluding people, and you're actually going to cause a lot of problems. I think, but I can see where they're coming from. They're trying to fight a problem that they know is coming.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the CBDCs. What for some of our viewers that don't know about it, what is a CBDC?
It's just a digital currency that's a central bank digital currency. That's exactly what it stands for. I mean, I'm going to be completely not honest and say I don't understand what the UK is pitching in terms of what it'll be, but it would just be a digital currency that is actually, it'll be pegged to the pound most likely, and it'll just be a digital pound that you can spend in any other way. It's just a way, I believe, to try and get into the new world that exists, the digital world, especially since COVID, when contactless became such a large thing. And I think they're trying to combat cryptocurrency as a whole and try and alleviate that. But I personally don't think, I think it's a square peg in a round hole, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah. But if it's a digital currency, and digital is programmable. So
Yep.
That's the aspect with it. From what I can see, it's a programmable money that can be controlled by the producers, which is going to be the central bank of England, in your case. With us, it's going to be the ECB in Europe. Programmable money. That can have good and bad effects down the line. Everything might be okay now, but if we have a change of regime in Europe or in the UK, and they start messing around with that programmability of it, where you can spend it, how you can spend it, how much you can spend. A lot of people seem to think that that can't be done or it won't be done. I think we're in for a shock.
The very nature of it, it says it in the name, it's central bank, so it's centralized. It totally does the opposite of what you're trying to do by implementing it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And were you over in Madeira recently?
I was over in Madeira. I went to Bitcoin Atlantis. I try and get to as many Bitcoin conferences as I can. After our conversation before this, I think I'm probably going to look at Amsterdam in October as well. Yeah, I like to get over to them. I just love listening to people speak about it and speak passionately, very knowledgeable, high up people talk about it. Michael Saylor, I could listen to all day. So yeah, I love going to events like that and meeting like-minded people. I think all of us, when we're in Bitcoin, feel like we could speak about this all day, quite openly and happily. And that's something I love, because I think when you go down the street, you don't have that conversation with people. If you said to someone, "Oh, I've got Bitcoin," they go, "Whoa," that sort of thing. So yeah, it's nice not have that reaction. Speak to like-minded people.
Yeah. And going back a little bit in your work, okay, being an accountant, yeah, and many people starting to talk to you, any of your current clients starting to talk to you about maybe Bitcoin, accepting Bitcoin as a payment, a store of value. How's that going?
So in terms of businesses, a lot of people talk to me because holding Bitcoin on your balance sheet, Michael Saylor says it's a high growth asset that you can hold on your balance sheet quite easily. So yeah, those conversations are definitely happening. From my perspective, obviously, I'm not an investment expert, so I don't tell people what to invest in. That's purely their own risk profile and what they feel. But I can give them my opinion on what Bitcoin is and how it succeeds. I'm seeing a lot more clients now start to talk about the tax implications, because they're either investing in or already invested in Bitcoin and similar cryptos as a whole, but certainly Bitcoin majoritively. And as things go up, they're getting the right tax advice in the right place to ensure that those real world conversations are happening. From an accountancy perspective as a whole, I feel that accountants still neglect it as an asset. So and we all know this within Bitcoin. There's still a long way to go. Probably less than 1% of people are invested in it, and that reflects in accountancy as well, because certainly 95% of accountants won't touch it, and that's because of the stigma that comes with it. So certainly I'm having a lot more conversations with not just clients but accountants around not just tax treatment, but about how to deal with it, the tax implications of it, but the accounting implications of it as well. So yeah, there's certainly a lot more going on around it. I think the other thing is, a lot of Bitcoiners will never release their Bitcoin. So, they might not even need tax advice unless they're considering disposing of it anyway.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about the tax implications in the UK and how it works in the UK, the percentages and when they get charged. And
so with Bitcoin specifically, tax implications are capital gains tax. So it's tax on an investment. So your capital gains tax rates are based on your earnings. So if you earn up to £50,000, you get up to £50,000 at 10% capital gain. So to give an example, if you earn £30,000 of salary, you get £20,000 of capital gains at 10%. Anything above that would go into the higher rate bracket, which is 20% on capital gains. So to work a real easy calculation, if you buy one Bitcoin at £10,000, but then sell it at £50,000, you've made a £40,000 capital gain. You get a small tax-free allowance. So for this tax year, it's £6,000. For the next tax year, it's £3,000. So if you did it in this tax year, you'd have got £6,000 tax-free in my example, which leaves £34,000 of taxable gain. And then that £34,000 would be taxed at either 10% or 20%, depending on your earnings that I talked about earlier. So the tax overall, it can get complex if if you've been buying for a long time and dollar cost averaging in. We need to factor in your average cost price. So for example, if I bought one Bitcoin at 10,000 and one Bitcoin at 20,000, my cost price is 30,000 divided by 2 Bitcoin. So my average cost price is £15,000 per coin. Obviously, it gets more complex the more transactions you've done, but that's how we would work out your capital gain. To work out your capital gain, you probably need a savvy accountant on board. Someone like myself who not only understands but can help you calculate it. In terms of from a Bitcoiner perspective, one thing that I've learned, and we all know, is some of the bits are very personal to that person, the stack that they've got, etc. Work with someone, not just who you're going to trust, but someone who will factor those into your conversations. So, for example, you don't need to come to me and tell me how much you've got, but that average cost price is the important bit. So if you can tell me how much you paid for your total stack, not for your total stack, if you can tell me the average cost price per Bitcoin you've got, I'm able to work out your taxes from there. The other thing is, from a personal perspective, you can set up non-disclosure agreements with your accountant if you are very particular about what they do and don't know. So that's also important, because a lot of people won't consider that. So that's why I say get specialist, advice where you can. Obviously, I'm promoting myself there, but at the same time, there are other people in the space that deal with it. But if you speak to someone outside the space, they probably won't understand fully what you're talking about or how you talk about it. But yeah, overall, it's capital gains tax. It's nice, and my job is to make it nice and easy for you to calculate and report.
Yeah, no, but it's good talking to somebody that has the knowledge in Bitcoin and that can help other business people as well, because there's so many accountants that just run a mile from it, and they're advising their clients not to go near it when they haven't even got a clue what it's about, which is wrong.
Not just that. There's accountants out there giving bad advice because they don't understand it. It's not just bad advice; it's wrong advice. I've seen people file their taxes wrong because their accountant doesn't understand crypto and Bitcoin as a whole, and that's a problem. You need to get specialist advice. Most accountants worth their salt will happily have an initial conversation with you. So my website, my crypto tax out website, you can book a call on there, right? And that call costs £50. It doesn't cost £50 if you join me as a client. And I'm happy to help anyone. If someone wants to come along and ask me my opinion and they're happy to pay for that advice, fine. If someone wants to join me as a client, I'm happy to do that call for free. I'll quote for them up front, etc. But quite often that conversation can go, I'll give you a bit of advice. You'll realize that what you've already been told is not necessarily right. And that's what I want. I want to debunk that myth. It doesn't have to be a big conversation. It doesn't have to be, I've got an accountant, he's told me this, it's always right. If I tell you something, by all means, go get a second opinion. I'm confident that I'm right, so that's fine. But if you only get one opinion, you're ultimately, what a lot of people don't realize is you're the person that signs off your taxes. Your accountant doesn't, you do. So if it's wrong, HMRC will only come at you about it. They won't go to your accountant and say your accountant was wrong. So it's important to get the right advice.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah, definitely. And then what I've been thinking about as well, because we all came into this, well, most people came into this like kind of for the money and as traders. Yeah. And then we soon realized, okay, I think that's the wrong thing to be doing, trading. When I'm talking to some of my clients and I'm talking to them about Bitcoin, I always point out to them, there's three types of people that get into this. First of all, there's a trader that is trying to chase the money, trying to chase 5-10%, looking at the screen all the time. Over 95% of traders lose over time.
Yep.
And the data shows that, right? The second type of person is an investor, somebody that's done a little bit of homework on Bitcoin. They understand what it is, a little bit about what it is, and they have a couple of grand there and they just want to put it into Bitcoin and leave it there for 4 years or longer. Yeah. And then there's a saver, somebody that, and that's what I kind of teach people to do, is how to save in Bitcoin. Use your fiat currency that you get paid in to pay for your goods and services, anything that you want to store for 4 years or more, put it into an asset that's going up in value. Yeah. And you can save every week or every month doing it that way. Yeah. So going back to the point that I was trying to make is regarding traders. Okay, people that come into this and they're trading all the time. A lot of people aren't understanding that every time they buy and sell, there's a tax implication there, and that can catch up on them in the future. And I think it is going to catch up on a lot of people in the future. Because something like this happened in America, I can remember maybe a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So from my perspective, what I see is exactly what you've said. A lot of people who don't understand the tax implications of buying and selling. So a taxable event is when you dispose of any asset. The reason for that, and I'll always give this example, if I bought one Bitcoin at £100 and today it's worth £50,000 and I sell all of that into USDT to realize a gain, just because it's in USDT doesn't mean I haven't realized the gain. It doesn't have to be in my bank account. I've realized the gain because I've sold the Bitcoin. I've sold the asset. It doesn't matter what I've sold it into. It matters that I've sold it. Now, to your point, when people are doing that over and over again, they lose a lot of what they're doing in how it works and what gains they've made or what losses they've made. I've seen people who especially in the last bear market. The last bear market hit around, if I remember rightly, around May 22, maybe. What that meant was people had made gains in the year before, the tax year, because it's tax year, so it ends on the 5th of April. So in the year before, people had made gains, but then overnight, things fell 50, 60% in the market, and they'd lost all of those gains. What they didn't realize was they still owed tax on those gains because it was the prior year, and they hadn't sold what they've now, for example, I make 100 grand off a small altcoin. I then put it all into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin drops 50%. I still owe on the gain I've made from the altcoin. The fact that Bitcoin has fallen, if I don't sell it, it doesn't matter. Until I sell it, I don't realize that loss. So that loss doesn't exist. So effectively, what that means is people are investing tax money after the event by putting it into Bitcoin and holding it, or putting it into a more realizable store of value. Now, there are ways, and softwares that we can work around with that, but that's why you need a specialist accountant, because you need to understand where you are in tax liabilities and not get caught out. I've seen people get liquidated because of their tax bills.
Yeah. And to be honest, the way you explained that, I'd say 90% of people that are out there trading, like retail people, are in that category of what you just explained. And they don't even realize it. They don't know themselves.
And HMRC I'm a member of a group called Crypto UK, which is like a regulatory group. We liaise with the regulatory associations to try and understand what's happening. So we speak to HMRC, and HMRC are aware of crypto, and they are preparing to carry out crypto inspections. What a lot of people miss, in my opinion, Lawrence, is crypto's blockchain. So blockchain is transparent. HMRC need one bit of data, which is a wallet address, and they can find everything you've done. Just because it's in the blockchain, in the digital sphere, doesn't mean it's not transparent, doesn't mean it's not visible to HMRC. So that to me shows that they've got an understanding, but they are also preparing to sort of fire at these people that have got no knowledge, because they're not going to, they're sending out emails, they're sending out letters, they're getting information from Coinbase, they're getting information from crypto.com about who is investing and how they're investing. And once they gather that information, if people aren't filing and are wrong, they'll probably find out, and it's quite easy for them to find out. And they're at this point at the moment where they're warning people, but I would say after the next few months, they're going to stop warning people. They're going to come after them. And if you get caught, you can get up to 100% fine and penalty of your tax liability.
Yeah, just people need to be careful. You know what I mean? And that's something. It's great we're having this conversation, because about this podcast is what is money, what's coming, that's coming. We can see that's coming. You know what I mean? And then how do people protect themselves? The best way is to get a good advisor, somebody that knows and has been in this and has been helping other people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people probably worry about cost. I mean, the way I generally work is I'll help them set up. I'll help them, whether it's software, whatever it is, I'll help them set up, and they can set up themselves, so they're not paying me to do it. And then I'll quote up front what they need to do, and what I would recommend doing. It's their decision then. If they, if it's too much and they don't want to do it, that's fine. I understand. But ultimately, they know what's in front of them. I think people are scared. I think people are scared of knowing and how much it will cost them to know. And that's why you should work with someone that's willing to work with you. They're not going to just throw invoices at you and say you owe X, Y, and Z. They'll help you and understand your requirements and understand, what apprehensions you have. And they'll tell you up front what it's going to cost. And then you can make an informed decision.
Yeah. It is very, very important. Definitely. So what's the plan for yourself then going forward? What are your plans yourself this year, next year? Anything big on the horizon for yourself?
So the main things are I'm going to Nashville. I'm going to Bitcoin conference in Nashville. That's something I'm very much looking forward to.
You're going for a week, are you? You'd have to go for a week if you're going to America.
Yeah, so
2 weeks.
I'm there for a week, so I'm actually there. I think I'm there for 6 nights. So I'll be there traveling. Obviously, there's so much to see in Nashville, so we'll be traveling around. I'm planning on renting a nice car and going around and seeing what I can see. And then really, it's about I'm going to a UK event next month called Cheat Code. So I'm hoping to see a few people there. But then from a business perspective, it's just about increasing my crypto exposure, hopefully getting a few more crypto clients on board. Obviously, being a Bitcoin person myself, it's so much better if I'm speaking to people that are like-minded, and I can help advise them because I'm in that mindset myself. And then just DCA in, I think, is the tagline there.
That's it. Keep stacking them sats.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
And I'll keep buying MicroStrategy as well in a tax efficient way in my pension.
That's it. I'd rather buy normal Bitcoin. You're going for the MicroStrategy
It's
aspect.
tax efficiency. So my own business can invest in my SIP tax free, and I can buy MicroStrategy. But I will still buy Bitcoin traditionally. I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that struggled with me about an ETF was, unless it's in a
Yeah,
pension,
let's get into that a little bit, actually, talking about the ETFs a little bit, yeah?
Yeah.
If you want to explain to our audience a little bit about ETFs, they've heard a little bit about it before, and then...
Yeah, so an ETF is just a fund that you can invest in to get Bitcoin exposure. So usually the reason for these things is you can buy them in ISAs or SIPs, which means in an ISA, you get £20,000 you can invest in an ISA tax-free every year. That's free of capital gains. So if you put £20,000 into an ISA, let's say into MicroStrategy, and then in 10 years' time, those MicroStrategy shares are worth 10 times the amount, you have no capital gains to pay. So that's the first thing. In a pension, again, you can do the same. You get Bitcoin exposure in a pension. It's a tax efficient method, so you can invest into pensions without paying tax on the money, because you pay tax on the money when you withdraw it as a pension. So it's an efficient way of doing it. Now, the ETFs are great because they give retail investors in stocks and shares a chance to expose themselves to Bitcoin in their traditional methods. So, I use Hargreaves Lansdown for my pension. It gives people in those pots and their ISAs and similar opportunity to more freely buy it without having to get an exchange account, which your average normal person is probably not quite comfortable with just yet because they don't understand it at day one. So getting an exchange account, having a cold wallet, these are all things that we understand in the industry, but not necessarily mainstream people understand. So an ETF gives them that opportunity. One of the issues has been in the UK, ETFs are not readily available to us. A lot of fund managers, Hargreaves Lansdown, etc., have made the ETF not available. I believe the reason is to do with the regulation that was brought in by the FCA about the financial promotion of crypto, which means that if you're not a UK entity, you can't promote crypto in the UK. You have to be a UK entity and FCA registered, which those funds aren't. So therefore, they've made it unavailable. But it gives tax advantages is the first thing. However, my opinion would always be, if I could put my money into Bitcoin or an ETF, unless there was a tax efficient reason to do so, I would rather buy Bitcoin straight out as a traditionalist, etc. But like I say, it's down to tax advantages, the reason that those ETFs are good. It's also good from a Bitcoin perspective because it's more mainstream. It's much more exposure. Industries and investment buyers are buying this asset class now, whereas before it's like a black market. It's only available in certain places, whereas now it's traded on some of the biggest exchanges in the world.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. And then regarding pensions, okay, if someone has a current pension already, now I know all pension providers are different, can they go to their pension provider and ask them, can they allocate 50% of their pension like into MicroStrategy or into a mining company or something like that?
It purely depends on their pension. So depending on what pension you've got, you might have a pension with, let's just think of an example, Standard Life. You might have a pension with Standard Life. You've probably got a standard fund that they invest in. Now, what you could do, and this is what I did, I gathered all my pensions that I had and I asked to transfer them somewhere else, which you can do. So I transferred them into a Hargreaves Lansdown. There are other companies out there that do this, but I transferred it into a Hargreaves Lansdown SIP. So all my pensions were in one place, but they're under my control. So you can do that. You can put them into a place where they're in your control. You can buy and sell as you please. You can't withdraw, but you can buy and sell as you please. So some pension providers will be different. They might give you options of funds that you can invest in. If they do, look at those funds because some of them will have exposure to the Bitcoin ETF. So, for example, some of the BlackRock funds will have added the Bitcoin ETF as part of their fund allocation. So you just have to go in and take a look at the detail behind it to see who or what fund, what assets that fund invests in. It'll tell you the weight of everything that invests. Failing that, like I say, you can move it into a SIP, a self-invested pension fund, where you have control over it and you can invest where you please. The obvious issue with that is when you are talking about exposure is at this moment in the UK, you can't get the Bitcoin ETF, so you can't invest in Bitcoin directly. But things like, I think it's, if I remember rightly, I haven't invested in them, but if I remember rightly, it's Grayscale is the mining company. MicroStrategy is obviously heavily Bitcoin focused. Those are the sorts of two things you can invest in via a SIP and ISA. Coinbase as well. I think Coinbase is stock exchange listed.
Okay, brilliant. Any other advice to other people? Not advice, but like any other opinions people should look out for when they're regarding their tax implementations or buying Bitcoin or pensions?
It never hurts to get someone on board early. I think that's the key. I think the people I work with and myself in the industry, we're quite open and honest. And what I mean by that is find someone that will have a chat with you, whether it's a 5-10 minute chat, tell you where you are in your journey and whether you need someone at that part of your journey. That shouldn't cost anything, and I certainly would feel passionate about that. So don't be afraid is probably what I'd suggest. Don't be afraid to ask the question. Don't be afraid to get started early. The one thing I'm finding at the moment, and this is where it's most difficult for people, is they're going back 2 or 3 years because they started 2 or 3 years ago, they've left it, and now they're panicking. And the hardest thing about that is you're asking someone to try and help you do taxes for things you can't remember 2 or 3 years ago. So that, the earlier you get started, the better. It never hurts to have an accountant on hand who can help you, have a contact, have a relationship. And overall, be very careful of the advice that you take. Don't take what your current accountant says as gospel. For me, a red flag is someone saying, I'm not crypto native, or I don't understand crypto, and then offering advice on it. That's a double negative. It's a big red flag. That's why myself and others in the industry are quite niche, because we're crypto natives. We understand blockchain. We understand Bitcoin. We understand how it works. We understand the fundamentals, and we understand how the tax works. So at this moment, that would be my biggest piece of advice. But don't be afraid to talk to someone about it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And just thinking, if somebody has an accountant that they've been working with for a long time and they're friendly with them and they've been helping them really well, can they come to you and you can help them with the Bitcoin part instead of splitting, except to walking completely away from their accountant?
I work with multiple clients and accountants I work with who will come to me and ask me to help with them specifically with their crypto. What I will do is I will prepare a report using the software or my own software that we use. I will prepare a report for their accountant that will clearly detail what to put, where to put it, including the notes on the tax return. So that section is all filled out for them, and that way they can maintain that existing relationship. You are right. That's a very good question, Lawrence, because a lot of people will have client accountants who are family friends, they've been with for years, etc. Doesn't mean you have to walk away from them, but I would always say as well, make sure your accountant's bought into that, because it can seem very backhanded if you go, I've got another accountant who's going to do this part for me. Speak to them about it and say, look, I'm going to seek specialist advice. Any accountant worth their salt should be absolutely fine with that. Brilliant.
So if people want to get in touch with you, Robin, how can they get in touch with you? Twitter, social media, your website? Give us a plug.
My website is www.cryptotaxhelp.co.uk. I am on Twitter on the Secret Investor. So my handle is @SecretInvest2. So that's Secret Invest without a T and a number 2 at the end. You can get a hold of me on there. You can get a hold of me via Crypto Tax Help. My other business, my traditional accountancy business, is bythebookaccountancy.co.uk. You can get a hold of me at any of those. Like I say, don't worry about the cost of a call. That is there to filter out people who are just going to ask me absolutely, non-related questions for a free phone call. So if you have a legitimate reason to ask me a question, don't worry about the £50 charge. Just please make contact, send an inquiry, whatever, and I'll come back to you.
Brilliant. So we'll connect all them contact details into the edited video, and everybody will have your link, and it'll be all dropped into YouTube and all the social media platforms as well. Okay, thank you for your time, and we will be talking soon.
Thank you for having me.